We out here just waiting for a minute to confirm that we are indeed live. Son of a bitch, we're live. All right. So welcome everybody to a unofficial, unannounced, so on and so forth, Salted Streets live stream. This is Big Bird Offie coming at you live from the Salted Streets studio. The reason I am going live tonight is because there's been some interesting news as to recently with the involving the mask mandates, particularly in airline travel. And so I wanted to cover that with you today. I wanted to bring that to you today. If you hadn't seen it, we'll talk about it for a second. And on top of that, I'm going to recount some of the I didn't really go into my trip back east last episode, so we'll talk a little bit about that, particularly pertaining to the travel and the mask mandate and so on and so forth, so it actually makes sense for this live stream. So without further ado, we're going to click on a little button here. We're going to hope the audio, and it looks like the audio is still working, and look at that. Hey, here's my Twitter. So we're going to go ahead and pull up a couple stories here, talk about them. This one coming from CNN Politics. The CDC mask mandate for travelers no longer in effect following judge's ruling, officials say. So, what are we talking about here? What we're talking about is essentially the end of what was the mask mandate in airports and on airlines. Hashtag kind of. Not exactly fully. It appears at this point that some airlines obviously will still be able to, they're in private business technically, and they will be able to kind of make their own policies as far as mask mandates. But considering the world the way it is today, I think that would be insane for trying to carry this on forward. So we're going to jump into a story real quick from Routers. Let me jump over to the screen for you here. Routers, here we go. U.S. will no longer enforce mask mandate on airplanes, trains after court ruling. Now, note the word enforce here. I'm very interested to see where this article goes. I pulled up a few kind of more or less trusted sources, if you will. And I pulled them blind because I kind of want to see where this goes. I've been seeing certain things come in over the Twitter feed today about, I'm not going to lie, a lot of bad takes as far as like people bitching that airlines are no longer requiring masks and that their children are going to be at risk now and so on and so forth. And, well, I get where you're coming from. You can also kind of go fuck yourself a little bit because it's just not what we're dealing with today, man. I understand some of the takes coming out about this, but at this point, if you believe a mask can help you on an airplane from particularly COVID-19, I think you should probably reassess what sources you're getting your information from, and you should probably do some critical thinking and come and try to come to a conclusion that you may not have already come to. Because I feel like you're probably wrong if you feel like there's a problem. So let's just go ahead and jump into this. The U.S. will no longer enforce mask mandate on airplanes, trains after court ruling. So Washington/Chicago, which I think is entering April 18th. That would be yesterday, ladies and gentlemen. The Biden administration will no longer enforce the U.S. mask mandate on public transportation after a federal ruling in Florida, hashtag surprise there, on Monday ruled that the 14-month-old directive was unlawful, overturning a key White House effort to reduce the spread of COVID-19. Soon after the announcement, all major carriers, including American Airlines, United Airlines, I like how they give their stock. I'm assuming this is stock. Let's click on the button. Yeah, that's their stock handle. Congratulations, you're trying to take them down. And United Airlines, as well as National Train Line Amtrak, relaxed their restrictions effective immediately, so on and so forth. You can read more. Last week, U.S. health officials had extended the mandate to May 3rd, requiring travelers to wear a mask on airplanes, trains, and in taxis, rideshare vehicles. That means your Uber and your Lyft, or transit hubs, saying they needed time to assess the impact of a recent rise in COVID-19 cases caused by the airborne coronavirus. Now, that being said, what are we talking about here? We're talking about a Florida judge, who I will pull up here in a second. A Florida judge essentially overturning the executive order around mask mandates via federal assets, aka airports, federally funded transportation, public transportation generally, and so on and so forth. So this is really not a major change, if you will. I mean, I recently flew back to the East Coast from the Pacific Northwest here, right out of Seattle. And when I was in SeaTac Airport getting ready to leave, I remember listening to the intercom at the airport. I was sitting at my gate, just kind of waiting, doing my thing. I'd already gone through security, done the whole deal. Didn't have to show COVID test, nothing like that. I did wear the mask going through security. But I was wearing one of my little, what do you call it, neck gaiters there. And nobody said nothing. Just went right through security, got to the gate, and I'm sitting there, and I was very early. So I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden the announcements start coming through. And I'm, just kind of vaguely tuning them out. Mind you, it's like 5 o'clock in the morning, so I don't really care at this point. I know where my gate's at, supposedly. There was 3 gate changes that morning, but, neither here nor there. And eventually this intercom comes on, and it reminds me that at SeaTac Airport, the masks are required due to federal regulation, and that any violators could be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and that cloth and neck gaiters were no longer allowed to pass as masks. So I was like, oh, well, that sucks. The comfy little neck gaiter I had on at the point. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I understand what it does and it doesn't do. But so I decided, I better be, I'm trying to be a good little flyer, and I decided to go to the nearest store, or whatever they call that thing now, to Hudson, whatever it's called, in the airport, where you can go get books and snacks and the whole 9 yards. And luckily they had some paper masks for sale, so I was able to procure a couple of those, and I was able to get on my flight, no problem. Now, that being said, I flew Alaska Airlines, great airline. Yeah, they're going through their growing pains. Well, I'm not going to say they're the greatest in the world, but they've always been good to me. We'll put it that way, relatively. And I will say, on the flight out from Seattle to the East Coast, our flight attendants made a point to let us all know that it was a federal crime to not wear your mask on an airplane in between bites and sips, if you will. And so, everybody on board kind of acquiesced. There was no drama, none of that business. And but they were real on about it. You'd be taking a sip of coffee. I was flying a red eye, so I was just drinking coffee. For some reason, they weren't serving alcohol. I don't understand what was going on there. But I was sipping coffee, and I was put it down and be like, all right, I'm still holding my cup. What are the rules here? What are we doing? Can I just leave my mask down? I had the old chin diaper going on at that point. I took another sip. Next thing you know, I see stewardess coming up, and she's talking to people about, like, hey, if you're not going to take, you got to put your mask back up in between sips. And I was like, I guess this is what we're doing tonight. So we just kind of went with it, and it was no harm, no foul. I don't really give a shit, to be perfectly honest. And I do give a shit. I'll put it that way. I don't like having to wear some bullshit around my face when I know, generally speaking, scientifically, what it does and what it doesn't do. Put it that way. And I'm not super satisfied with having to sport that thing on for 6 fucking hours, knowing it's really not doing much on an airplane. the recirculated air that everybody bitches about on an airplane, unfortunately, is some of the cleanest air that you could probably get because it goes through some of the most high-tech, what do you call those, HEPA filters on board, and then it gets recirculated. What are you going to do? It's not that big a deal, I guess, supposedly. But now, thanks to this judge out of Florida, you no longer have to on an airplane. And we've been watching the last, day and a half. We've been watching the Twitter takes just come through, just people angry, people upset that I don't. What do you mean I flew to Florida to go to Disneyland, and now all of a sudden there's no mask mandate on the airplane, and so now when I fly home, my kid's not going to be safe? That's wear a mask, bro. How about that? Are you worried? Wear a mask, man. Oh my gosh. But enough about me. Let's go ahead and check in to this was a great one. The Ohio Star. It's a fun little article I found here. Texas mask mandate lawsuit attorney welcomes Florida judge striking mandate in separate suit, but says, quote, our cause will continue. This was a really good one, but this particularly, I pulled this up because it does name the judge in question that did the actual ruling. The executive director and general counsel of the Texas Public Policy Foundation told the News Star Network he welcomed Monday's ruling in Florida by federal judge Catherine Kimball Mizell, a former law clerk for, oh no, don't say it, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. If I might add, personally, one of the greatest Supreme Court justices on the court at this time, but I digress. So, Clarence Thomas that overturned the Center for Disease Control's mask mandate for public transportation and air travel. So, mind you, that's not Clarence Thomas, but it is this particular judge, Catherine Kimball Mizell. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but we're going to go with it. So, quote, the arguments that are pending in our ongoing lawsuit in Texas are the same arguments that prevailed in the case in Florida, with a judge in Florida agreeing that the Centers for Disease Control did not have the statutory authority that it claimed to impose a face covering requirement for all Americans engaged in transportation. Now, that being said, I want to note just for a second on that particular language. There we go, change the view. The language being, the CDC did not have statutory authority. Now, I focus on this because that, from the little commentary I've gotten at this point, let's put it that way. I'm prefacing this with I've heard two legal minds, one from Commentary Magazine, and what was the other podcast? No, it was an article I read. I'll have to pull it up at some point. But we've had two legal minds saying that, like, this ruling in particular was done essentially on administrative grounds, where they looked at the current law and what the executive can and can't do. And they looked at the law and they said, well, frankly, according to the statute, you can't do this. And so Judge Catherine Kimball Mizell struck it down and said this is unconstitutional. You can't do it. So that's where we sit today. Now, there's been a lot of takes that I have seen on Twitter today. I've already remarked about one of them. And it's pretty easy to tell at this point where that there's two camps in this territory. And I don't think it's news to anybody that there is essentially two sides to this deal, maybe three if you're lucky, with kind of a center lane being like, well, I don't know what's going on, maybe this, maybe that. And then you got on one side, generally the quote-unquote right side of the public or the political spectrum that is like, these masks are basically, you might as well be a bunch of Nazis telling everybody to go blah, blah, blah. And it's all just fascism and authoritarianism and so on and so forth, which I kind of agree with. And then on the other side, you got, the kind of the more progressive lefties saying, if you don't put a mask on, you're going to kill grandma and grandpa and probably your mom and your dad and maybe your younger stepdaughter, but who knows? Your stepsister. But either way, it does. Nobody's happy about this except for the people that are super happy about this. The people on the left, generally the far left, I would say the generally COVID zeros type people, the people that think that sometime in the future, by some miraculous event, there will be no such thing as COVID in the world. As long as we wear masks and everybody gets vaccinated, it's definitely going to happen, according to them. But according to them, this is like basically the worst thing since Trump got elected. I don't know, in their mind, I don't know what's going on there, but nothing. I've seen a lot of bad takes. I'm not real into like glorifying the really stupid takes on Twitter, because let's face it, if you've spent any time on Twitter and you decide that you want to be vocal about anything, you're going to have some bad takes on Twitter, man. So I kind of generally give everybody the point, the benefit of the doubt. But, if you're, what's her name? Something Rubin. What's her name? I don't know. But if you're like a standard blue check and you're coming on there and proselytizing about wearing a mask, I'm going to politely go tell you to go fuck yourself, because that's insane. I just did this, man. It's utter fucking nonsense. It is utter nonsense. All right. If you are going to undertake if you're going to undertake travel across country on an airplane, and you're going to agree to sit there with untold number of random individuals who you've never met, and that 3, 4, 5 years ago, you would have been equally okay with breathing whatever kind of communicable disease that they had to breathe out, and you had nothing to say about it back then. I don't want to hear shit from you now. I'm sorry. Mind you, this is my personal opinion. I'm not going to speak for my fellow half of Salt of the Streets here. I'm going to let him speak on his own. I think his point of view is rather clear. If you have been watching our podcast episodes, this should be no news to you. And I am, for one, incredibly excited that some judge has found a way at some point to say, nope, we're going to veto this law. This is not the jam. We're not doing it. And because I just did this, man. I just flew 6 hours. It's 5 hours one way. It's about 6 hours on the way back, because headwinds and tailwinds and so on and so forth. And it's just not, you don't want to be doing that, man. You really don't want to be doing it. If you do not have to sit there with a paper mask on because you're required to wear paper, you can't wear cloth, according to the airport. If you have to do that, man, it's not a good time. It is really not a good time. Things are wet. Things are moist. There's condensation. Builds up in your beard if you got a beard. If you don't have a beard, it just builds up in your mask. So that's fun to think about. So anyways, in place of today's Salt of the Streets short, I got too caught up in the bad takes on Twitter. I had to come on here. I had to talk about something. It's just, what grinds your gears in the Peter Griffin sense of things. This just was grinding my gears all day, and I had to get on here and talk about it a little bit. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to kind of wrap this thing up here now. My name is Colin, aka Big Bird Offie, of the Salt of the Streets podcast. If you have not checked it out yet, if you're not a subscriber to Salt of the Streets, I don't know what you're doing right now, but you better be clicking the bells and buttons down below and making sure you're subscribed and you got notifications on, mostly because YouTube doesn't like what we talk about. So don't trust them notifications. Make sure you're clicking the bell if you got something to say about the mask mandate. If you disagree with me entirely, if you agree with me, whatever it is, throw me a take down in the comments below. I would really appreciate that. We here at Salt of the Streets would appreciate that. If you have not checked it out, we have Salt of the Streets episode 125 available now on all podcast platforms, and it's also on YouTube. And what else? Yeah, we'll do that. I'm gonna hit the social screen. So hit up our socials at Alpaca Donovan, out Salt the Streets for Donovan there, at Big Bird Offie on both Twitter and the Instagram. We don't really fuck with our Facebook, but you can always hit us up there. I generally try to get in, check the notifications at least once a week, but other than that, I'm not, Mark Zuckerberg and us just ain't friends, but you can always hit us up there. We will find you. You can find us, and you can also find us on saltthestreets.com. Everything we do is essentially posted there. We're also breaking into the Rumble game. I'm looking at the length of this video, and it should be no problem to post on Rumble. Been having some problems right now with posting our entire podcast in its entirety, or even the clips, because they're just a little too big for Rumble to handle at this point. So I might be having to reach out to them in person actually and see if we can work something out, because Daddy needs more than just 15 megabytes, man. Come on, what do you expect me to do here, Rumble? So, anyways, I'm Big Bird. Love you guys for hanging out, and I will see you later.